free Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Download the app in the description below. Hey guys, welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to something a little bit different. Today, instead of looking at just an individual vehicle, we're taking a look at a group of vehicles at Russian top tier. We're talking 8.0/8.3 if you're counting the IT1 that's recently been moved slightly up. In my normal commentaries, I tend to focus on one vehicle, and not even on it, but rather on a particular topic that is on my mind, whether that is talking about American teams, or whether that's talking about the TU4. In this video, I could very easily start addressing the issues with the IT1, how ATGMs affect the matchmaker. I could touch on the topic of spawn camping, but I thought, for once, I would try a different approach. I would run you down through the mind process that I had when I was playing the game. Now, these matches are going to be far from perfect, but they have one thing in common, that is, if we continue this into a series, is they start as failures, but then progress on to be carry matches. What that means is that even though the match in the first 3 minutes might look like a complete abomination, I was able to bring it back with some clever tips and tricks in mind. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to dive into the gameplay, talk primarily about what's going on in my head, and we'll try to steer away from any kind of, topic debating issues. So, first things first, we're in the IT1. Now, the IT1 has, from an ATGM perspective, more of a long-range role, and it would have been quite smart for me to turn left at the start of that hill, go on top of that little camping spot, and, control the battlefield from there. But we're in an empty match, and we're in Ash River, which is a map that I really do fancy. And of course, I'm an aggressive player, so what am I going to do? I'm going to go as far forward onto the battlefield as I possibly can. So I come to the side of the hill, and I, put myself in a bit of a camping spot here, looking if I can see somebody crossing along. And I see an M47, but before I could push forward, he gets finished off by T10. So what do? Well, I'm not going to stick around here for any longer, because, again, with the matchmaker being half full, it would be economically regressive to sit here and wait all day for somebody else to come across, so I push forward. That ended up being my first mistake. Now, there are a couple of chalk points on this map that you have to memorize, and one of them is right up there. That little hill section has a perfect camping spot for tank destroyers, and hell, in this situation, a leopard. A leopard that I simply didn't spot. I did, however, spot an M60A1 that was making his way up the hill. And as good as I am with my mouse aiming ATGM skills, I of course completely butcher my first shot. Now, the ID1 bears possession to the fastest reload rate of any ATGM currently in the game. Unfortunately, it still wasn't fast enough for me to get a second shot on the M60 before it hid behind the trees. And there's something else behind those trees, which is an AI that continues firing through. This is why I was panicking. I kept looking at that direction whilst there was a leopard on top of the hill. So, smart as I am, I of course reverse back onto the side of the hill and think to myself, I don't want to abandon my position, but I'd also want to repair. Unfortunately, as much as I might be hidden from the M60 and the AI's view, I'm not safe from the leopard that I haven't seen, even though he fired at me at least 4 times. Well done, Orange. So, what now? We've got 132 points given in this match, surely it's all over. Well, there's one thing that we like to call the SPAA revival. Now, of course, different tech trees will have different SPAs available. If I was playing the Germans, I'd have the Kugelblitz or the Kuelian. If I was playing the Americans, it would have been the M42 Duster. And if I was with the British, it probably would have been the Falcon. Now, the ZSU is probably, at the moment, by far the best option for this, because, as I previously talked a bit on the actual video on the ZSU, it's more of a light tank destroyer than it is an SPAA. And luckily for me, somebody on my team was also feeling a little bit generous with how far they pushed. A chieftain simply went along the middle of the game. Now, if I didn't finish him off, the T62 or the T54 in front of me probably would have, but frankly, I'm probably the one right now in big need of kills, because I'm going to have to get some points back up if I want to continue with this match. And the ZSU it's a pleasant thing to drive out in. Now, I will have to turn this around and tell you, if I'm playing against Russians, I find the ZSU quite amusing, but the main issue with ZSU is that people don't position themselves properly. Side on, this thing will tear you apart. if your back is exposed, if the side of your turret is exposed, the only safe way to fight one is to fight it, well, from the front. And even then, tanks like the Leopard are gonna have a problem. So what I'm doing here is I'm vigorously looking left and right to find something worth shooting at. And speak of the devil, there's another chieftain over on the other side of the hill. He's got a perfect spot. Unfortunately for him, I was able to see him because he was firing. And then to his aid comes a Focke-Wulf 490 D13. Luckily for me, he didn't kill me in one strafe. So that gives me the option to finish off the chieftain and then immediately rotate the guns around and focus on the Focke-Wulf. And behold, there is also a meteor in the air, which is going to be important in just a second. Because as I pilot snipe the D13, he executes me, and we're now in the third phase of this match. I've got an important decision to make: tank or plane. Now, if this was a capping match, which means there were 3 cap circles or 1 cap circle, I would have probably gone for the tank. But knowing that there is a meteor in the air and that he's probably going to be oblivious to a proper approach, I'm going to take out the LA-174. Besides, I've been doing this tactic a little bit around, which is I've taken the aircraft that otherwise don't perform very well in air combat in realistic battles, and I've taken it into ground forces as a backup vehicle. And even if you don't get to kill any enemy aircraft, you'd think, well, then you're just throwing away spawn points. Just strafing tanks, giving their position away to your team, is an effective way of helping your team out and, of course, giving yourself bonus points. Now, what I've done here is I've approached the meteor from below. That means that he cannot possibly see me, he doesn't have any time to evade, and his wing just falls off. The tactic of plane versus plane combat in ground forces is wildly different than that in air realistic battles. I actually applied the tactic that I learned back when I was playing simulator games. I realized that it wasn't so much altitude that matters, it's how you approach the enemy, and often enough, approaching them from below is a better tactic, because there's no markers. And frankly, I think it's harder to spot a target when it's right on top of the ground level, you're looking for a silver little speck, than if you're looking up at the clear blue sky. So, if you're flying planes out, I would highly advise that you do approach enemy aircraft from below. Not just will that increase your airspeed and make the approach a lot easier on your end, it's going to make it harder for him to evade or even spot you for that matter. Now, before I go back and start strafing ground targets, I do a bit of a climbing roll to ensure that there's no other enemy aircraft in the air, because you're going to have matches where there's nobody flying aircraft out on the enemy team, and you're going to have matches where the entire team suddenly takes out a lot of aircraft. And of course, in that situation, awareness is quite contributable. Now, I've spotted one of the British SPAAs, not sure which one it is, but it has an open top design, so technically, with the default shells on the LA-174, we should be able to penetrate it. But it might take a couple of approaches, and with the LA-174 really not being a designated ground attacker, I don't expect things to go extraordinarily well. But since there's a T-62 at this moment pretty much holding off their spawn, it would be a good idea for me to help him out a little bit with that SPAA so it doesn't annoy him. Now, the tactic used behind obtaining spawn points is one of those that I've never really touched on. Realistic battles have the system. If you go into arcade, I believe it's 3 respawns, so you can take out any 3 vehicles 3 times out. But in realistic battles, you have something called spawn points. You start off with an X amount, you take out a medium tank, a light tank, or a heavy tank is going to distribute a different amount of spawn points. And it's really important to realize that if you don't do anything during a match, you could very much be exiting it as soon as you've been killed once. Get yourself some competent SPAA in the actual lineup and do some damage to these vehicles, and you should be looking at a much better result. And yes, to those wondering if the LA-174 can fly underneath the bridge on Ash River, the answer is yes, but you might want to pull up a little bit sooner. Well, I have to have a bit of fun every once in a while, right? But regardless, I knew that I have enough points for the T-10M, that was my primary vehicle to continue to step number 4, the 4th phase of the development of the match. Probably the one that is going to now become a little bit controversial, but let's touch on it. These matches in ground forces are continuously built up from 3 different sorts of, of designs. You have the single/triple cap, where capturing a point will start draining the enemy's tickets. You have the rather rare break, whether it's on Poland or Eastern Europe, which basically has 2 or 3 capture points that you have to get one after another. And then you have probably the most common one, and the one that I don't really like, the spawn cap. Now, notice how I say spawn cap? It's because the actual cap circle that you have to capture, and to capture this one you have to actually be in the cap circle for a very long time, is located right between the two spawns. So, for me to win this match by capturing the enemy point, it would have been suicide. I would need at least 2 vehicles, so they are perpendicularly located to each other, looking at the opposite spawns, and even then it would have been risky because we're exposed to a potential fighter. So throw in an SPAA and maybe you're looking at a potential win. It is in much better of a tactic idea for us to go and simply execute every single player on the enemy team. Now that is going to be easier said than done, but still less stressful than on some other maps. Ash River and maps alike are quite favourable of mine because they are enclosed. They do not have open ground where a player can just freely hide wherever they want. There's no side forest, there's no open fields, there's no houses where you can, crawl into little crevices. But the map design here simply disables that, so finding the enemy shouldn't be too hard. So here I am in the process of pushing towards the enemy spawn. I spot a Panther 2. He doesn't see me fast enough, put the shot right into his turret cheek, and that's game over for that guy. And this is where the controversy starts coming in. I mean, we have 2 ways that we can win this match. That's either by killing all the players or by capping the point. Now, I've just discussed that we can't capture the point without risking our own lives. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm sadly going to engage in what a lot of people tend to refer to as spawn camping. And I want to correct myself here and say, I'm not actually spawn camping. I am spawn camping the spawn cap. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Now, the map design here enables me to go up this hill, even in my T10M, and since it's slightly downhill, I should be able to use even that bad gun depression against the enemy ground units. First thing I spot is a Kugel Blitz. That was the Panther that just respawned in. Felt a bit unfortunate for him, but I do want to protect any of our potential aircraft in the air, so he's the first target I take out. Now I start thinking a bit more rationally. Where are the enemies going to be coming from? You see, I'm actually outlooking directly to one of the enemy spawns. So, whilst I'm looking at one spawn, I'm keeping my attention to the other. And as much as I know a lot of people get annoyed by this, you have to understand the difference between a player literally going around the entire side of the map to, wait for you in the spawn, and a player who's pushing towards the spawn because that's really the only option he has if he really wants to win the match. And that's what I'm doing here. There's a Korean that just respawned in and is harassing one of my teammates, so I push forward and try to get myself a shot on him. Now, whilst I'm doing this, pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm constantly looking at the other spawn as well, if for some reason somebody respawns in. But the reason I say this isn't because I want to educate people that are trying to push the spawn of enemy players. It's because knowledge can be used in both ways. I've seen several cases, and this especially happens with German and Russian teams, is they get overly confident, push the enemy spawn, and then get out-spawn camped, which causes them to lose the match because they've just lost the entire presence on the battlefield. Pay close attention to what the enemy team's about to do. Whilst I'm busy killing the Coelian, in comes a Horton. Now this Horton immediately sets me on fire and destroys my cannon breach. I'm now completely out of use. There's nothing I can do. I cannot defend myself. If somebody is to spawn in front of me or to the right of me, any of the 2 spawns, I am dead. But the enemy's out of players. They don't have enough players. Remember, this match was a relatively empty one. At this point, we've been playing for so long that most of the players have already left. Most of the players didn't get to respawn in an aircraft, they didn't get to respawn in a AAA, they simply used up their chances in the respawns they had. So, luckily for me, I'm still sitting here doing my work. But to my surprise, the enemy team didn't give up. Oh, no. At this point, they've actually got the player advantage, and they kept pushing. They kept pushing violently. So, as our team moves in to start capping the alpha, this is now the go-to moment. This is where now we have to start actioning towards the enemy team. They respawn in a Yak Tiger, and whilst this is a great idea, as the guy was pushing up, he exposed the lower glacis for just enough for me to be able to easily penetrate it. Well, I'm pretty certain I could have gotten even through the upper plate. A Yak Tiger would have been ideal if he respawned it to the other spawn. But now comes problem number 2. The enemy is coming in with Narado. They didn't give up. I felt like I was looking myself playing on the enemy team. I just kept pushing on, never giving up. Unfortunately, the Arado was also flying in a straight line, so the 14mm gun that you get on the T10 is quite competent at taking them out. This is where the situation on the battlefield was starting to normalize a bit, and I wanted to just hypothetically assume what could have happened here. Let's say the Yak Tiger spawned in the right spawn. That would have probably taken me out of the match. If not for that, the Arado could have taken me out, and that would have really made the match development slightly different. But we're not over yet. These guys are not giving up, and the Arado that I just shot down has respawned in a Raketen Jagdpanzer. But to my surprise, I first thought that he didn't see me. I mean, surely he knew where I was, but he makes a left-hand turn and just guns it for the end of the map. So of course I get off the side of the cliff and fire off into the back of him. This is where we could start having a discussion on how ATGM's ammunition works, because it never seems to blow up in the IT-1 or the Raketen Jagdpanzer. Then I realized that this could just be a trap. Yeah, the guy went around the corner, made a U-turn, and then came back firing one of his rockets. I was lucky not to get killed by him. And huge shout out to the guy, because I don't see a lot of these tactics evolve. Usually players are extremely predictable. This guy literally made a bait of himself and almost ended up executing it perfectly. So now the situation is looking a little bit grimmer. We've got 4 players, they have 3. I have the better position, but the rest of my team is on the back of the map, so I can't really rely on them until they get here. My best tactic here is probably to go towards Alpha, start capping, which should be able to bait the entire enemy team to one location, because they know that if I do able to cap, they're going to lose the match. Remember the enemy team? Yeah, they're still not giving up. At this point, a player has respawned in an M60. I didn't know that. So as I start moving back towards the Alpha, I of course have to take a look at the initial spawn to make sure nobody's here waiting for me. And as soon as I push forward, I can spot a player has just respawned, is pushing forward, and I butcher my shot. I forget about the M60's weak spot and rather go for the lower glaciers, where I would have shot normally if I had Heat FS loaded up. He takes away my track, and what I do is a bit of a backhand turn to make sure I'm outside of his line of fire. And that's when things go seriously wrong. A Spitfire comes in, he takes out our remaining aircraft in the air, a Yak-3, and then finishes me off. This is where, for us, the match just went from quite good to quite bad. So of course the instinct would tell you take out the LA-174 again and kill the Spitfire. Yes, but that would also mean that I would not be able to respawn in anything until the match ended, because we currently have 7 minutes and a half left. So I make the gut-wrenching decision of taking out the T-62. It's the fastest of the tanks I have, and hopefully we'll be able to go from our spawn point to the enemy spawn point before the match ends. But yet again we have that problem. We've left the Spitfire alive, so it naturally comes back and bites us in the arse. So I've just lost my driver and the left track, and I'm left exposed. Unfortunately for the Spitfire, he was now running out of ammunition. He only has 4 or 6 set of rockets, and as he makes his next pass, it was to my surprise the T-10. Although, after I've killed the Arado, I wasn't that surprised. It's just, we had some SPAs loaded up previously, and nobody was really doing much work. It's the T-10 that ends up killing the Spitfire, and kind of ironically, saving my ass from getting killed here, because I was pretty sure with the guy's aim, he probably would have taken me out with his next hit. And now comes phase 5 of the game. The clock. The clock starts ticking, and our problem is, we are out of points. Now, I would be lying if I said I was actually aware of the timing situation here, and the fact that we would have lost were I not to push in. But it was the instinct that was telling me, go and push in. If not for else, you want more kills. You want to finish off on top of this game, and you do want to win. But I wasn't paying attention to how badly we were doing with tickets. When I mentioned there's 2 ways to win a match like this, so one by killing all the enemy players and the other one by capping, I blatantly forgot about the third most important one. Time. Time is pretty much the answer to everything in the game. Every match is timed. It will come to an end eventually. Even enduring confrontation matches have their timer. And because of it, I should have paid more attention. I do urge you to pay more attention to when matches like this start going for as long as this one has. And I frankly wasn't aware. I didn't think that we would have lost this match. I mean, after all the work I've just put in, all the work my teammates just put in, I felt like I was playing on a dream team, you know, the three of us carrying to the bitter end. And yet, we nearly are facing defeat here. They've got more tickets than us. So it's a bit of an urge for me to tell you that if matches do drag out for this long, pay attention to the tickets. In certain cases, you might be forced to quite literally suiciding into the enemy spawn just to get a couple of extra kills, knowing that every kill you get is going to take away 100 points from the enemy players. And then luckily for me, in comes that M60 that for some reason has spent the entire time in their spawn. I put a shell into him, butchering it, only killing his driver. A bit of wiggle, make sure that he misses me, and then I seal the deal by actually going for the middle of the tank and secure the ammo rack. What a nerve-wracking match. And still, to the bitter end, these guys didn't give up. I mean, it's an equal amount of shout-out to my teammates as it is for the enemy team. I love these matches. They look stressful, they look lengthy, they're exhausting. I mean, the amount of fatigue that you receive as you're driving the tank for the 5th time out. But for some reason, it is oddly satisfying to have these matches where they just keep on giving. There's constantly going to be more and more that happens. So as I start positioning myself next to the enemy spawn, the T-62 on top of the map has started going ham. This guy just pushed through the entire top of the map, locating himself on top of the spawn, and we're now kind of counter-looking each other. Perfect position. So, surely holding this enough until the end of the match should be the win, right? Not quite. Remember the enemy teammates? Yeah, these guys are not giving up. That M60 I just killed, he's now coming back in the Bearcat. And since he probably knows where I am, and the fact that I'm in a bright whitely camo tank that shouldn't be too hard to spot on the brown greenish camo, I'm in a lot of trouble. So what I do is I go next to the rock and just try to not get spotted. The Bearcat, to my surprise though, goes in and eliminates the player that was furthest from the match, the T10. And by doing so, he also dropped all 3 of his bombs instead of just 2, because as I'm looking through my binoculars, as he turns around showing his belly, I notice there's no middle bomb left. And that's a clear indicator for me that he's going back to base. He can't finish me off, and we have an open ground here to eliminate a tortoise. And I didn't think twice of it, but looking at it now, I mean, it's not half bad of an idea. You're talking about a giant, slow tank destroyer that's pretty much a giant box of steel and isn't going to be able to be killed even in a, with a heat FS shell or the T10's APHE shell. You need to put a lot of shells into it or be able to outflank it, and since nobody really ever plays it, I don't know where the ammo rack is. So that's probably one of the smartest things they can do right now, is taking a giant slow tank destroyer that's going to really extend this match. This guy, at the time of playing, I thought this is stupid. Then I realized just how much of a genius move it was. We are neck to neck with tickets. If this tortoise can stay alive until the end of the match, which by now it's probably 2 to 3 minutes, they will win. And the irony of it all is that I was not aware of it. I was playing this match just like any other match. I just wanted to finish off with a win. I've just gotten, 8 or 9 kills, or what was it? I don't really want to lose this because of the RP gain at the end. I was fatigued. We've been going on for 20 minutes. And yet, the top 3 members of each team just kept on fighting. My hat's off. Now, looking back at this, for me, just the process of doing a video, of sitting down behind a pre-recorded footage, whether it's an hour old, or a week old, or a month old, there's always something that I find that just blows my mind, and this was it. The Tortoise, the top 3 players on their team, that Spitfire, the Bearcat, our team, everybody fighting until the very last possible moment, not giving up. And if I didn't watch this, if I just scraped this game and said, well, it's too long, too boring to watch, I would have never realized that what this tortoise was doing was dragging out the match, hoping they could win on tickets. Now even the Bearcat comes back and starts strafing me. They are now really going at it. And I do my best to go for the driver here. I wanted to make sure that this guy was, yep, I know where the ammo is now, so I'm going to go for that and finish him off. I personally thought this match could have gone on for another 15 minutes were we to have enough respawns. Little did I know that this kill was the decisive of us winning. And the enemy team still had a chance. If that 163 didn't ram me and the Tortoise driver stayed alive, they could have won. It would have been a draw at least, which they are very rare. And they still didn't give up. The guy respawned as Centurion Mark III, and if he was able to kill me here without the 163 crashing, they could have won the match. These are scenarios, these are matches that I would on a normal circumstance delete because they have good moments, but they're too lengthy, they appear boring. Until you really look into them and you realize that the amount of ticket difference was 100 just before we finished off the match with that one kill. And hats off to all the 6 players in this team located on the top 3 of both teams. Fantastic players. Anyway guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed something a little bit different to spice up your Friday evening. But for those of you who want to see more of this, be sure to let me know in the comment section below. But until next time, take care and safe driving. Wouldn't this create longer queue times? It would. For the Russians playing TF4s, which at this point I don't think anyone gives a shit about. And because of it, I would rather talk about the cons of this. This would completely free up the matchmaker on Korea and Spain. It would give us the option to actually fix some of the things that might be wrong with the maps to start off with, because Spain's AI are something that should go as soon as possible. In fact, AI in general should be removed from the game. But with teams not relying anymore on Team 4s winning the matches for them, and having more fighters that can actually fight the Sabres and the Hunters, we should slowly see an increase in successability